got some good news. I had a book breach the top 5 of my favorite books of all time. Technically top 4, because my new 4th favorite book of all time is Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. The classic of classics. Everyone's usually heard of this. You should definitely pick this up. I bought this back when I was still living in Denver. I don't know if you can tell, it's kind of beat up, but a bunch of tombstones, and then you got a guy right here hiding behind it. And at first, I thought it was a very weird cover. I do love these Signet Classic editions. I don't know if that's how you actually pronounce that, but I really like them. They hold up well for paperback. They give you just nice and simple, and yeah, this was a great joy. This will definitely be, if this isn't my favorite book of the year, I will be very surprised. 5 out of 5, no problems. I never use this word, but superb is what comes to mind when I think of this. Or I didn't prepare an author section. Everyone kind of knows who Charles Dickens is. If you don't, he's the biggest English writer from the 1800s, mainly from 1830 to 1860, I want to say. That's just off the top of my head. He was born in, there's a little author section right here, so I can just tell you this. He was born in February 7th, 1812 in Landport, Portsea, England, and died in his Gad's Hill home, that's hard to say, in Kent on June 9th, 1870. And he wrote up until his death. I had to read The Mystery of Edwin Drood in college, the same class I read Bleak House in. It was a detective fiction class and one of my favorites in the whole time I was in college, but we had to read both of those, and that was my first introduction to Dickens. And then I read A Christmas Carol last Christmas. Everyone should read this if you're into literature at all, if you like prose, if you like atmosphere, if you like character, if you like dialogue, if you just, he does it all. I loved every bit of this. I started this at the beginning of the year, I want to say, and have been reading it on and off. And since, if you don't know, Charles Dickens, he published in serial, so he published in like the newspapers and the magazines of his time. Publishing was really like blowing up, and everyone was able to get a copy. This was the working classes, like Game of Thrones of the time, essentially. Everyone would wait and get their copy, their monthly copy, and usually it was about 6 chapters per month. Part 1 was 3 chapters, and part 2 was 3 chapters, and you can definitely tell like when the 6th chapter comes, because usually there's like a cliffhanger or something that makes you want to keep on reading. So every 3 to 6 chapters, something really exciting happens, and every time I thought something was gonna happen, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing now, and then immediately he flips the switch and completely like gives you a twist or just something out of left field. I really didn't want to like figure this out for myself. I just wanted to like join the ride, sort of like the Game of Thrones craze with this, and with pretty much all of Dickens' work when he was publishing. Everyone loved, like, they spent the whole month pretty much speculating about what's going to happen, and this went over for a period of like 18 months usually, sometimes like 16, sometimes a little more, a little less, but usually around 18 months, a year and a half, people were reading the same story. And so that's why all of his books are so big. He was writing these chapters like as they came, so he didn't really know what was going to happen either, and that's also what makes it freaking amazing, because he ties everything in so well. Like, he remembers what happened way in the first chapters or the second chapters. He's able to throw in foreshadowing. I really wish I could know like how he prepared these stories and what his process was, and because it's just honestly amazing. I couldn't believe how much I enjoyed it, or how much I didn't really like. I don't know, you always hear this title, Great Expectations, or Tale of Two Cities, or I don't know, something that like, for me anyways, I don't really like think too much about. Like, it's just like, oh, that's the title. But I mean, throughout the main character's life, Pip, it's really about his expectations, and his expectations change as he gets older, and how these change and how they change him is really, really fascinating. And I wanted to read it, but I didn't want to read it at the same time, because even though I was only like a quarter or halfway through at certain points, I was like, I didn't want the story to progress. I, loved the characters and loved what was going on so much that I knew, like, once I like continued, some change was going to happen, and then that change would obviously end up with finishing the book. But in a lot of these a lot of the times when these were published, like, many of these people didn't know how to read, so they would get people to read for them. And so it was a common occurrence for the one person that knew how to read would sit down, and all these people that didn't know how to read would listen to them read every month read the story. And it was like a community thing. And so I just find that really fascinating, really interesting. It's good to understand the publishing and book history of it before you kind of jump into the story, just to understand like how it'll flow and what to expect and everything like that. A little bit more about Dickens' life. I don't know why I didn't read all of this when I first started. He was the second of 8 children in a family continually plagued by debt. That's a recurring theme in a lot of his books, is debt and debtor's prison and running from it. The young Dickens came to know not only hunger and privation, but also the horror of the infamous debtor's prison and the evils of child labor. He worked as an attorney's clerk and newspaper reporter until his sketches by Boz in 1836 and the Pickwick Papers in 1837 brought him amazing and instant success that was to be his for the remainder of his life. In later years, the pressure of serial writing, editorial duties, lectures, and social commitments led to his separation from Catherine Hogarth after 23 years of marriage. It also hastened his death at the age of 58 while still engaged in a multitude of work. He seemed like the type of guy to never, give up writing, so that's how he made a living, but it also was his passion. I believe so, at least. I mean, I'm sure some of these books were for a paycheck, but from what I've seen, the majority of them are, great. And I do plan on reading all of his works if I can. I think I'm going to get to Oliver Twist next, and then Nicholas Nickleby, and then I might, after those two, and A Tale of Two Cities, or after those three, I'll probably start kind of like with his career and start with like Pickwick Papers and the sketches of Boz. His life really reflects a lot in his books because he got to experience multitude perspectives, and that really changed his life, from going from being poor and being a child laborer to like going to the debtor's prison and then all of a sudden flipping the switch and having money at some point, working as a clerk and understanding the legal system. Majority of his works comment on that, especially like relationships between, orphans or poor children with older adults, which you don't really see too often in fiction at all. Like, it's a very rare relationship that you do see like the truths of his own life in these characters. This follows the boy named Pip, one of the most famous characters in all literature, and his relationship with Joe. So he is an orphan, which is common in a lot of Dickens stories, and he gets taken in by his sister. She's not good to him at all. He doesn't like her and she doesn't like him, and he just kind of does what he needs to do to survive, but she bullies him, hits him. Her husband, Joe, one of my favorites, if not my favorite character that I've read. You can't hate him. He's just so nice. He's a blacksmith. That's how he makes money. He's a working class man. He knows he's not fit for high class people or that lifestyle at all. His life is in the forge. He's bullied by Pip's sister as well, and he sticks around for some reason you don't really know. And so it's the relationship at the beginning. Pip apprentices with him. That's his early to young life before he becomes an adult, but he falls in love with this very beautiful, very rich girl named Estella, who her mom, Miss Haversham, kind of takes Pip in. That's some of his other expectations, and she's determined to make this, poor boy into a gentleman. That's kind of like the beginning of the story, and obviously progresses. I don't want to spoil anything. I think the surprise of kind of how everything unravels is part of the joy. There's a free YouTube audiobook that I follow along. That's how I mainly read it. That's amazing. I'll link it down below, and I highly suggest it. It's very good. You can just speed it up if you want and then follow along with a physical copy, or just listen along. It's a great listen, and I highly suggest it. But go out and read it. You won't regret it. I can't wait to read more of his. Thanks for sticking with me. Peace.